Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's class. So the last time we met, we looked at Redux, and I believe everybody is really good with Redux now, based off the response and the submissions I've been seeing from the tags. So uh, you guys have done some impressive work. I think one thing I really want people to improve on is your UI. We'll talk about it more when maybe at a later time. Okay, let's just get right into what we have today. So today we'll be looking at custom hooks. So we'll be revisiting hooks, but this time we'll be looking at custom hooks as the ones that you create on your own. I think you all understand what something being custom means, right? So we'll also look at reusable components. Okay. So when we talk about custom hooks, right, it's just basically a JavaScript function whose name starts with use and then lets you reuse logic between components without duplicating your code. So in essence, it helps you reuse logic without having to rewrite the same code in different places, right? So we all understand that there are hooks that are provided already by React. We've treated a lot of them. I mean, I think, yes, we've done a lot of them. We've done use states, we've done use effect, we've done use memo, we've done use ref. I think, yeah. So now I want to look at how we can have custom hooks that can perform actions that we want to, like default actions that we want to perform. Okay. So why do we use custom hooks? We want to solve a problem. And what's the problem? The problem is rewriting logic everywhere in your code. The same thing that you wrote in one place, you're going to write it in another place. That's the problem you're trying to solve by creating custom hooks. So we extract to a custom hook for reusability and clarity. Now, general rules for hooks is that number one is they always start with a use. That is, it's always use state, use memo, whatever whatever hook you want to create, it should always start with use. Okay. Then you can only use it at the top level of your component. Okay. You can return states, can return a function, you can return values. Are we together? Can I go on? I need you guys to be active so that we can move fast, please. Let's go ahead and get right into it. So let's create a custom hook to handle toggling, right? The custom hook to handle toggling, something we can use to toggle our model state and stuff like that. Okay, so let's go ahead and add and create. Let's just add a folder within the utils. And then let's call it hooks. Let's call it custom. Okay, so let me create a new file and then let's call it use toggle. Yes. Okay. So what comes to mind first when you are looking at toggling? You're thinking you want to have an initial state and then you want to update the initial state, correct? So if we come here, we will start by first importing use states, use states from React. Okay. Then let's create our toggle hook. So let's say export const use toggle equals to, then we want to say our initial, as the initial value of the toggle should be false. Okay. The initial value of toggle should be false. All right. Then we can now write our logic inside. So let's say const is open. Okay. So we have is open and then we have set is open and then use state. We want to pass that initial state to the use state. So at first, this is open will always be false. Okay. Now let's go ahead and write functions to handle the toggling. So let's say const open, and then for const open, we want to say want to update that state. So set is open, and we want to update that state to true. So when this action is triggered, we want to update the state. We want to update this to true. Okay. Now I want to do the same for closing. So when we want to close this particular update this particular function to false, we trigger close. Now we also want to have a toggle function. So let's say const toggle. And for toggle, we want to say set is open, previous. Yeah. Okay. So now what we are doing here is we want to toggle the current state. So we are saying if it is false, change the state to true. Maybe it is true, change it to false. Now let's return our function. So now what we've done here is create a simple use toggle hook, right? That we are returning the state, which is this, and then we're also returning functions. These are actions that we want to take based off what we want to be able to access these functions everywhere in our application. Okay. So what we have done now is a simple um, React hook, custom hook to toggle the state of is open. Okay, let's see it in action. So if let's maintain our overview component, okay? So let's remove this. Let's see a button. Then for this button, we want to have an on click. Now remember that we are using our custom hook here. We want to utilize this custom hook or access this custom hook to handle our modal behavior, right? So we want to utilize the toggle action that is inside this toggle action, okay, in the button, okay, and then we can close this button and call it toggle modal beta string. Let's use this. Okay, so now we need to access our toggle action and our is open state. Okay, so first thing we want to do is the structure what we need from our uh, from our custom hook. So we say is open. So we are bringing is open, and then we're also bringing the toggle action, and let's also bring the close action. Okay. For all of this, we want to bring it from use toggle. All right, so you can see that now we've imported our use toggle, and then we've accessed our toggle action, we've accessed our states, and then we've also accessed the close action, right? So for this button now, once this on click tree is triggered, this button should either open or close our model. Likewise, for this state, we are saying that based on the value of this state, we want to either show close or open. Okay, so let's go ahead and just have let's create a model. Okay, now this is a toggle table box. Okay, let's just create a model. All right, and then we also have our close button here where we are utilizing our close action. Okay, so now basically what happens here now is that we want to display this content as a model, and for this content to display, we want it to display only when this is open, is truthy. Okay, then same with here, we want when it is truthy, it should show close, because when it's truthy, that means this box is open, and then when it is false, it should show open. So if we come to, because the state initially is false, if we come to our component, we cannot see that box, which is this box. But when I click on open, we can now see the box. If we click on close here, it triggers the close action, and it can also close the box. So we just created a toggle hook, a use toggle hook that we can utilize anywhere in our application to handle modal behavior. Are we together? Okay, so I'm guessing only Josh is in the class. Okay, all right, let's carry on. So now that we've seen what it looks like to have a um, custom hook, let's go ahead and create another custom hook to fetch an API call, to fetch data from an API. Okay, so let's create a new hook here and call it use fetch. Okay, .js. All right. So for use fetch, we want to utilize use state and use effect to create this to perform the different actions that we want to perform. So I will bring use state and I will also bring use effects. Okay, let's go ahead and create our hook. So now our hook is use fetch is the name that we've given to this hook. We can now go ahead and define our state. So let's first define the state to manage the data that we want to call, that we want to pick from the API. Okay. Then we can now add a loading state. We can now add a loading state. And for a loading state, since it's a Boolean value, we want it to be truthy at first. Can always update that too. Then we want to have an error state. Okay. Const, yeah, thanks. And then we want to have an error state. Very good. Now, let's bring use effects to handle our API fetch. And for this use effect, we want to add a controller. So const controller equals new about controller. All right. So let's pick the signal from the controller. So I believe that this might be confusing, but as you can see, the abort controller interface represents a controller object that allows you to abort one or more web requests. So basically, it's just first you utilize the signal to monitor the abort call, so that if your API, if your user exits a particular view that is triggering an API call, you will be able to abort that API call to ensure that you don't encounter memory losses during your actions, right? During your users' actions. Do we understand that? So basically, it allows you to cancel asynchronous tasks. So it allows you to cancel API calls, basically. Okay. You see what it looks like when I utilize the signal. Okay. So let's go ahead. We'll get back to it. I will ask again if you understand when we're done with that. So let's say const fetch data equals to async. So I'm going to be using a placeholder API to fetch some data. Okay. So, right. This is my co-pilot is really stressing me. Try and res equals to await. Then we want to fetch and also monitor our signal. Good. So now this is the URL. We want to remember that this is a hook we are working with, right? Now, for us to do an API call, we must pass a URL to our fetch request, right? For us to be able to perform an API call. Now, if our response is not okay, right, we want to throw an error. Hold on, guys. So give me a minute. I just lost power, so let me fix my backup. All right, let's carry on. So we want to throw an error. We want to throw new error and say, let's just say error fetching data. Okay, good. Then if that's not the case, we want to pick our data from the await and add it and assign it to data. Then our next step will be to set data, which is the data now that we've gotten from our API call. We want to add it to this data here. We want to update this data state. Okay. So this is not something that people have not done before. We are just creating a function that we can reuse to handle this API fetch wherever we want to handle API fetch. Okay. So let's also set error here. Let's also set error here to null since it's successful. Okay. And then we can now catch. So let's set error message. And then finally, let's set loading to false. So basically, what we've done now, yeah, so what we've done now, so this is where I'm going to now abort our API call, okay? Then I can now trigger the fetch data. So let's abort it down here, not up here, sorry. Okay. So this is now like fail safe that we have put here so that if this let's assume that the user is on a page that triggered this use effect, right? And the user leaves that page, the expectation is that that use effect should stop working, correct? Now, what happens here is this controller dot abort is the action that we have decided to take if that user leaves that page. So if we don't want this API call to, if we don't want this use effect to run again, we want to abort the fetch data action. Now, when this abort is triggered, this is the signal that we use to track, to monitor when this abort is triggered so that we stop this API call from happening. Do we understand now? Okay. So let's go ahead and utilize our use fetch hook. Okay. Are we together? Okay. So let's just const what we want. We are trying to get, we want our data. Hold on. So something is wrong somewhere. Now let's figure it out. Sounds like, yeah.
Sorry, sir. This line that says if is not res.ok, throw new error. Okay, sorry. I think I saw. I thought I saw throw no error. Okay.
Is that all?
I'm trying to figure it out.
Through new error.
No,
So
I thought I saw wrongly.
okay. Yeah, so raise your hand up next time before you unmute. Make sure I tell you to unmute before you unmute, okay? Thank you. Okay, let's go ahead and get our data. So we want data, we want error, we want data, we want error, and then we want loading. Okay. And we want to pick this from use fetch. Okay. Yeah, so that's actually the API I want to use. All right, so as you can see, what we are getting, what we want to get here is the data, the error message, and loading state. That's if those exist, right? So let's say if loading, if it's loading, you should return the text of loading. And then for error, it should return the error message. Okay. Are we good? Do we understand what's going on here? Okay, all right. So we don't want to, it's just a fail safe to make sure that if our data has not been picked yet, we want to be able to show the user that this API call is in progress. And then if it fails, we want to be able to show the user that this API call failed. Okay. Then we can now go ahead and utilize the data. So let's just so for data, we want users. So this is okay. So we want users. So let's just see what we have on the console. So users. So if we come here, all things being equal, we should be able to see our. So uncut reference error data is not defined. Add use fetch. Okay. All right. So that was what I was looking at. So we have an error coming from here because this data has not been properly utilized. So let's go ahead and fix that. So let's say use effect and use effect closed, and this closed. We have our fetch. Now I try. We have our const await. Yeah. And then our if block. And set. And then wait as JSON. Set data. Set error. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay. Okay. All right. So apparently I spelled the data as date. Yeah. Okay, let's go ahead and see what we have. So if we come to our console now, we can see that we have our user information populated here. Okay. So you can see that we have 10 users. So if we go to another component, and probably we want to, let's use another component to do this. So let's use control form. So where's control form? Forms. Okay, so let's remove all this from here for now. Okay. I think we should. Good. So if we come here and we make an API call here for post, right? We should be able to, it's not defined, hold on. Yeah, okay. So we still get an error. Okay, so let's just maintain user. So let's just maintain users. Oh, don't waste time on this. So in the wiring inspection is not defined control for. Okay, I see the issue. I do not console the log our response here. Okay, all right. So let's see what that post looks like. Okay, that's is not defined. All right, so we can see that we have used the same custom hook that we used to get users over here in overview. This same use fetch with a different API. This is a different API route. We have used this same custom hook to get our data from another route. So you get the whole point of reusability now. So I don't necessarily have to write this whole logic from here. I don't need to write this anymore in the whole of my application because I now have my fetch logic. I can create a hook for my post request. I can also create a hook for my update request, right? Or delete. At the same time, you can modify this very hook to perform all those actions in itself based on the particular action you pass to it at the point of usage. Are we together? Are we good? Okay, so everybody understands this, okay? We can move forward. Rahim, do you understand what we've done so far? Just respond in the text box. Excel, you too. Let's hear from you in the text box. Are these people in the class? All right. Okay, let's go ahead and look at what we have. Let's look at reusable components. So what comes to mind when you think of reusable components? Just raise your hand and then I would pick and you can open it. And is any hand up? Okay. Michelle, let me hear from you.
Good afternoon, sir. Good afternoon, everyone. I think reusable components are components that we can keep on using throughout our project.
Okay. All right. Let's hear from Emmanuel. Josh, I see your hand. You are regular, so let's hear from people that don't speak regularly.
Good
Diego,
afternoon, sir. Good afternoon,
Diego.
sir. Yeah, reusable components are just pieces of your UI that you can use in multiple places in your app without having to rewrite all your code all over again.
Okay. All right. Let's hear from Abiola. Then we'll continue. So,
Good afternoon, sir.
good
Okay,
afternoon.
just like the name implies, it's these are components in which you can reuse in any part of your project, like in your pages, in another component, and so on.
Okay. All right. So I wanted to just hear you people. And yes, nobody is wrong, right? You all have great responses. Reusable components, definitely. But the fact that they are reusable, you use them throughout your application life cycle, right? So you definitely you use them in different parts of your application, yes. Uh, like Abiola and Emmanuel also said, uh, just like the name implies, they are reusable. But I would like to add that when thinking about reusable components, think about components that can work with different data and different props. Okay, because a button, let's say this button component now. So this button component that we have here, excuse me, that we have here, or tag, this can be used across the whole application, but it does not receive props, right? And it does not receive any data. But let's assume we build a component like a card component, or even the same button, but this time we build a button that accepts props. Now, that button can be considered as reusable, as a reusable component. Are you following? Yeah, so let's just do some stuff. Let's use that button as an example, okay? So let's go to components and create a component. And create a component called Okay, let's call it button. Button.jsx. Okay. All right. So now for this button component, now we want to make it a reusable component, right? So first thing I want to do is I want to define some props that I expect to use. Okay. Children. And then on click. Class name. Okay, good. So now that we've created this, let's close this button. And then for the button, remember we're expecting to pass an on-click event to it, and then say on-click, on-click. Okay, let's utilize the basic style. So now, if you notice what has happened here, when I added the class name, I have added a class name prop here. In essence, what I'm doing is I want to be able to modify the style of this particular button anywhere I want to use this button. Okay. Let's put this here. And then children. Okay. And then now for the children, I want a situation where whatever I put in this button should be the child of the button, right? That should serve as the button text. So if we decide to use this button, add this button to our, so let's delete this button up there. And then let's import the button we just created. All right. So as you can see now, we have our button. For the on-click event now, we have passed this close action that we got from our use toggle. Okay. Now, this button is going to have the same behavior based off the on-click event. So if we save this and come here, if we click on open, it should still open. Okay, so that's close, basically. Yeah, so if we click on close, it should close that button, like that model. Okay, so you see that the on-click event is working there. Now I can utilize this button in another, okay, let's just utilize it here. So let's bring this button down here and call it open. Okay, and now let's have it over here. Yeah, I think that's what we should do. So, all right, so if we come here, we should be able to use that button now that we created to handle open and close over here and also handle close here, right? Now, remember that we added a style feature to it, which is the class name, right? So if we come here, our button text is white. Let's give our button a BG blue. So why is it blue not showing? Okay, so let's see. That is not working. They'll install here. So let's check. Let's see. So for some reason, our styling is not working. We can't debug that now. This class is not for styling, so we'll just let it be for now. Figure it out later. So basically, this button now is a reusable component because we can now pass data as props to this particular button. Now, anywhere we utilize this button, we can give it a default title, and then we can also pass actions to it, and we can also pass styling to it using the class name prop. Okay, using this prop. I'm guessing, I'm thinking I probably uninstalled Tailwind from this. Well, I don't think so, but it's fine. Let's move on. So avoid wasting our time. All right. So let's look at another example of a custom component, right? So let's see, let's create a card component. So we'll say card. Card.js. And then okay. So for this card component, we want to have, let's give it here. So let's have title and card details. And then let's also allow for flexibility. So let's also be able to add code content into our card. Okay. So if I do children, yeah, we can now pass definitely we can pass children. And then we also want to see our title come from wherever we're using the card. And then we also want to see your content. All right, so now for our title, instead of having card title here, we will pass our title here. Likewise, our card content. Okay. All right. Let's try that styling again over here. Okay. So let's save this card and then let's import this card over here. So now, because this card, as you saw here, this card already has a title and a content. So when adding this card over here, we will now be able to, remember it's a component of its own now. So if we say card from component/card, we can now add title and then we can add content. Okay. Now that we've added title and content, remember that we are adding these two as props. but we still want to have content. We still want to have like children content, right? Let's close this. Good. So we still want to have other contents within the card where like we want to be able to write our HTML depending on how we want it to look over here. And it will always first display our title and content before it displays all this other content because of the structure of our card. Okay. So if we save this, we should be able to have good. This is the overview page. Okay. So I believe the text white should not be text white. Let's do text black. Okay. Is that BG? Text black. Right. Okay. All right. So we have our overview, and then we have this is the overview page. We have our toggle close and open displayed. So what we have done is we have now displayed our card with our overview and content, and then we also have our we also added this whole content that we already wrote inside this very card. So now this is a reusable card component that we can use across our application. We can utilize this. I can bring it down here and it will become a new card. If I come here and call it new overview. This is the new overview. And this one is overview card. All right, so if I save this, we now have two different cards. Now remember that this card and this card is not the same again. They are different, but it's the same component that we utilize to create two different cards. Do you understand? Are you following? Okay. All right. So let's go ahead and see if we can take one more example. Okay. So I think we'll just stop. We'll stop there. It's pretty clear. The whole concept of reusable components is pretty easy to understand. Am I right? Okay. All right. So for this, I think I'll try to see how I can drop maybe a mini task for us to just explore the usage of to explore custom hooks and also explore reusable components. So that in our next class, we'll be able to look at some advanced ways of creating reusable components. All right. Thank you everyone for joining today's class. I look forward to seeing you in the next. Have a great day ahead and a great weekend. Bye.